Good morning, gentlemen. Wonderful weather. I'm going to talk about India and China today. Now, there's one of my very close friends, and he's put an article on YouTube, rather a video, in which he said that the war between India and China is imminent. Well, I respect his views, but I will give you a different view. India and China have been historical neighbors since the dawn of civilization. But there was not much people to people contact because there was the Himalayan mountain range, the highest in the world, which bifurcated China from India. And throughout history, let's accept the fact that Tibet, for various periods, has always been under the control of China. China had suzerainty over it, and Nehru recognized it. The British didn't recognize it, and they made Tibet into a buffer between India and China. But after 47, both the nations threw away the colonial embrace and rose up. India, of course, followed a very different path, as didn't fight for freedom with blood and sweat and tears, which had been promised by Bose. On the contrary, they were gifted the freedom because of the after effects of Bose's foray with the Indian National Army. At that time, the British were really scared. They said, well, we won't be able to hold India, so they vacated and left. But as far as the Chinese is concerned, they were occupied by China, and there were untold atrocities committed on the Chinese, and everybody knows about the rape of Nanking by the Japanese and what all they did in Shanghai. That's also well documented. They had set up a puppet kingdom in Manchukuo with the old Chinese emperor Wu Yi, and ultimately it ended up with his wife conceiving a child from the Japanese staff officer. Anyway, after the defeat of Japan with those atomic bombs, there was a civil war, and then in that war, the man to triumph was the Communist Party led by Mao Zedong. So China was born in blood and sweat and tears, while India got freedom on a platter. Now, there's a marked distinction between the two. So, the Indian leadership, steeped in Gandhian philosophy, was not interested in dominating the world, whereas China had a very aggressive policy articulated by Mao Zedong, and he wanted to dominate the world. In fact, Mao was very keen that China is restored to its status as the center of the world, which it was during the Middle Ages when everybody went to China. And the Chinese emperor was the man who mattered in the world. So China is looking to become that, and they have almost achieved it by a system of governance which is autocratic, suppresses civil liberties, but at the same time they have elevated their people from poverty, given them food to eat, and China has gone ahead. And its income is about 6 times the per capita GDP of a Chinese is 6 times that of an Indian. And China's national health has improved. You can make out of the fact that they win about 300 to 400 medals, gold medals in the Olympics. India wins one. So you can get an appreciation of the physical health of the Chinese vis-a-vis the Indians, where the Indian government himself says that 40% of the Indian people are still in poverty, while China has lifted itself out of poverty. And the difference between the two has become so marked that China now has an economy of 18 trillion, India has an economy of 3 trillion. But India has a big part to play in the rise of China. Let's accept it. India and China have a trade of almost 125 or 130 billion dollars now, out of which $100 billion is in favor of China. So China is earning a lot of money from India. And it's like the golden goose. So if they start fighting with India and have a war, they will lose that economic leverage. So what they're trying is to just keep India caged. And that is the Chinese policy. Make friends with Pakistan, make friends with Burma, subjugate Sri Lanka, and India is ringed. Whereas the Indian leadership has been following the Gandhian philosophy. The Gandhian philosophy so deeply entrenched in India that none of the Indian leadership ever thought of dominating the world or even trying to influence the countries around India. With the result, even a small country like Nepal has a border dispute with India. Sri Lanka doesn't say yes, sir, three bags full to India. Burma, of course, is on its own spin, and they have handed over the certain islands to the Chinese, and the Lankans have given over the Hambota port to China, and Pakistan has also almost ceded the Gwadar port to China. And now they have the CEPC running through Pakistan. Of course, the Pakis haven't earned a dollar out of it, and the contrast they've gone into debt of about $20 billion. So, a marked difference in the political approach of both India and China. This is where China has scored. Now, India was not ambitious, not practical, and the Indian leadership, led by Pandit Nehru, had a one-point plan just to appease China. At the same time, historians will wonder why, when the British left India and gave certain borders to the Indian state, why the Indian state didn't police those borders or set up administration or their own right till those areas. And why did the Indian state relinquish its rights in Tibet also, which had been won by Brigadier Young Husband in the 1903-04 expedition when he reached Lashan, the Dalai Lama ran away to Sinkiang. Well, gentlemen, this is basically the flaw in character of the two nations. Chinese, as I've said, have fought for their freedom. They had a civil war which lasted 4 years, immense brutality during the war, and even during the Japanese occupation, while in India, nothing like that happened. So the question is, will India and China have a war? I don't think so. I don't think, because India does not want to fight China. That's the first point. What the Indians have done is, they have, I think, made a tacit agreement with China that the 1959 claim line which the Chinese had as far as Ladakh and Aksai Chin concerned is accepted by India. India is not going to disturb that. And India is ready to have that as the demarcation of the border. And all they're hoping is that China accepts the McMahon line in the east as the Indo-China border. At the same time, despite all provocation from China, India has not accepted the two-nation theory, the two-China theory. No, sir. At the same time, India has not supported the Tibetan cause for freedom. So these are points which we have to see. It shows that the Indian leadership is a bit of a pussycat as far as China is concerned. Narendra Modi can be very aggressive. When the Balakot incident took place, he said Pakistan will have to pay a very big price for it. But he doesn't talk like that about China. Though 20 Indian soldiers died in a hand-to-hand fight with China in the Galwan, what is known as the Galwan clash, Modi's kept quiet. And even Jai Shankar, the Indian foreign minister, is not going and condemning China. The Chinese are routinely protesting that Arunachal Pradesh is their part, and any Indian president or anybody who goes there, they protest. They don't like it. But India does not retaliate by pointing out anything about Hong Kong or about the two China, Taiwan, or about Tibet. And there is a Tibetan government in exile in India, but they are in name only. They got no power, nothing, not recognized by the Indian government. And they're just hanging around in Dharamsala, just passing away at the time. So this shows that India does not want a clash with China. And China also doesn't want to clash with India because they are earning big bucks from India. And by keeping India on tenterhooks, they can keep India down. And that's what they're doing. So, gentlemen, the situation as it stands is in the Southeast Asia is that India has a timid leadership. Now, India cannot go whole hog with the Americans also for the simple reason that America is an unreliable country. Today, they are with India. Tomorrow, they may well make peace with China. I won't be surprised if they make peace with China even on Taiwan. So, America cannot be trusted. They went away from Vietnam. They didn't much do anything in Korea. They retreated in Afghanistan. They burnt their fingers in Iraq, where an American is persona non grata in Baghdad now. So, what they gained out of it? Anyway, that's another point. As far as India and China is concerned, Chinese investment in India is tremendously going into billions of dollars. Chinese products are selling here in India like hotcakes. India is also exporting, but it's a minuscule, and the earning is with China. Maybe it's Narendra Modi's plan to keep China quiet like that. That's the only way, because in a border clash with China, let's take it takes place, the weightage will be heavily in favor of the Chinese. Because the Indian population centers are very close to the Himalayas, just about 100 miles from the border, while the Chinese population centers are hundreds of miles away from, and it will be very difficult for the Indians to reach them. Well, gentlemen, this is my view. I beg to differ with so many people who say there will be India-China clash. There won't be a clash, but tensions will continue. And ultimately, India, I think, in the long run, will have to accept the Chinese suzerainty over Asia. Now, that is the point, and we'll have to see how it pans out. Unless, of course, a very robust leader comes up who wants to take India forward. But the Indian character is such that they do not wish to antagonize anybody, and least of all the Chinese. That's the crux of the issue, gentlemen. China is on the ascendant, India is where it is, and the Indian leadership doesn't know they are members of Quad, but it's a half-hearted measure. They're not going full scale with the Quad to oppose China. India is not opposing China on most of the forums, and India is just hoping that India will be friends with Russia and Russia will temper the Chinese because Chinese and Russia are allies. We'll wait and see how it pans out. By the moment, gentlemen, I don't see any India-China clash in the foreseeable future. I close now and wish you all the best. Jai Hind. Glory to India. Subscribe to my channel, share it, like it, and come back again.